Hey guys, I am Venkat and this is part 21 of web development with Blazor video series. In this video, we'll discuss the standard as well as custom command buttons that we can use in a data grid. To perform CRUD operations in a data grid, we need these standard buttons: add, edit, update, delete, and cancel. To include them in a data grid, we set toolbar property to a list of string, and the individual strings in the list must be add, edit, update, delete, cancel. We discuss these buttons and performing CRUD operations in detail in parts 18, 19, and 20 of this video series. Now, in the interest of time, here's what I have done already. In the pages folder, I have added a new component, DataGrid buttons.razor. And notice the page directive here, I have intentionally set it to a single /. So when we run this project and navigate to the root application URL, this is the component that we see. And here we have a Syncfusion data grid. And notice the toolbar property is set to a list of string with those standard strings: add, edit, update, etc. So at this point, if we run the project and take a look at it in the browser, notice, as expected, we have the data grid toolbar with those standard buttons: add, edit, update, etc. Now, here's what we want to do. We want to leave these two buttons, add and cancel, in the toolbar right here. But then move these three buttons, edit, update, and delete, into a separate column in the data grid itself. So against every row in the data grid, we want these three buttons: edit, update, and delete. Basically, here is what we want to be able to do. When the data grid is initially rendered, against every row, we want to display these two buttons, edit and delete. When we put one of these rows in edit mode, then we want to hide these two buttons, edit and delete. Instead, display save and cancel in that row that we are currently editing. When we take the row out of the edit mode, then the opposite should happen. Hide these two buttons, save and cancel, and instead display edit and delete. This sounds like a lot of work, but actually very easy and straightforward with the Syncfusion data grid. In the data grid, just like these grid columns, first name, last name, gender, etc., we include another new grid column. Set the header text to whatever you want. In our case, let's just set it to actions. And let's also set the width of this column to 110 pixels. Here is the important bit. Inside this grid column, we want data grid buttons. In Blazor data grid terminology, these buttons are called grid command columns. So we first include grid command columns component. Notice the name of this component: grid command columns, plural. Inside this component, we want 4 grid command buttons: edit and delete, update and cancel. So inside this component, we include another component which has got the same name. The only difference here is it doesn't have an S at the end. So singular, grid command column. Next, we specify the type of button we want: edit, update, delete, etc. For that, we set the type attribute, and the value for this is command type dot. We can see all the different button types. In our case, we want edit. And then we specify some additional options for this button. And we do that using button option property. When I hover the mouse over, we can see it is expecting an object of type command button options. So we create a new instance of command button options. Notice when I press Ctrl space from the IntelliSense, we can see all the properties of this command button options class. Now, if we want text on the buttons like edit, delete, etc., we simply set this content property. But in our case, for these buttons, that is edit, delete, etc., we want icons instead of text. So we set these two properties, CSS class and icon CSS. So we set icon CSS to two CSS classes, e-icons, and we want edit icon, so e-edit, and CSS class equals e-flat. There are 3 button styles that we can use. In addition to flat, we also have round and outline. We'll see them in action in just a bit. Now, in addition to this edit button, we want 3 other buttons: delete, cancel, and update. So let me include the HTML here. Notice the HTML is very similar to this button HTML. The only difference is the type of button we want. So we want edit, save, and cancel buttons. And here the CSS class is different. So for delete button, we are using e-delete. For update, e-update, etc. So let's save these changes and take a look at the browser. As expected, in every row, we have edit and delete buttons. When we click the edit button, the row is in edit mode and both the buttons are replaced with save and cancel. And when we click the cancel button, the row is out of edit mode. When I click the edit button again, the row is in edit mode. Let's change first and last name. And then when we click save, the data is saved. To confirm it is saved in the database, let's reload the web page. We still have our changes. This means these are actually saved in the underlying employees database table. We discussed how to implement this in our previous videos in this series. Notice at the moment in the toolbar, we still have these buttons, edit, update, and delete. To remove them from the toolbar, it's very simple. From the toolbar property, in the list of strings that we have, remove these three strings, edit, update, and delete. There we go. The buttons are gone from the toolbar. These buttons, edit, update, delete, and cancel, are standard DataGrid buttons. Now, here's what we want to do. We want to include a new column in the DataGrid, and in this column, we want to include two custom buttons, U for uppercase, L for lowercase. When we click the U button, we want to convert all the letters in the first name column to uppercase. And when we click L button, do the opposite, convert the letters to lowercase. Even for custom buttons, same idea. We include a grid column, and inside that we include these two components, grid command columns and grid command column. Actually, in the interest of time, let's make a copy of this HTML and then change the bits that are required. First, let's change the header text to more actions, and on a custom button, we don't need this type attribute. So let's remove that. And with this button, we don't need icons. We want letter U as the text on the button. So instead of icon CSS property, let's set content property. Just like this U button, we need another button for lowercase. So let's actually copy this button HTML and then replace these three buttons and then change the content to L. Now, on both these buttons, we're using the same CSS class, e-flat. In addition to this class, we also have e-round and e-outline. Actually, on this button, let's use e-round class. Next, we need to wire up click event handler for both these buttons, and we do that using grid events component. We already have this component on this grid, and when any of our custom buttons are clicked, it raises command clicked event. So let's handle that. Let's call the event handler on command clicked. We don't have this event handler yet. We'll create it in just a bit. Notice when I hover the mouse over this event, we can see from the IntelliSense, the event handler receives a parameter of type command click event args of t value. So the type of value is employee because our grid is binding to employee objects. So let's place this event handler on command clicked in the code block. Now, here's the important bit to keep in mind. We have two buttons, but the event handler is only one. So when any of the buttons is clicked, it is the same event handler that is called. So inside this event handler method, we need to determine which button is clicked. For that, we can use this incoming arguments parameter. So if args dot command column dot button option dot, if you remember, we have set the content on the U button to capital U. Now, using this content property to determine which button is clicked is not the most elegant way, because when users change the content on the button to something else other than U, then this event handler will not work as expected. Actually, there's a feature request raised to include a property like ID or name on this button option class, so we can use that property to determine which button is clicked. For now, I'm afraid we have to rely on this content property. So in our example, when this U button is clicked, what we want to do is convert the letters in first name column to uppercase. For that, again, we can use the incoming args parameter On that we have row data, which will give us the employee row, and on that we have first name column. So we want to convert first name to uppercase. So we again use args.rowdata.firstname.toUpper. After the data is changed, let's not forget to refresh the grid so we can see the changes. Else, we want to do the opposite. Convert the first name to lawyer, and for that we use toLawyer method. Save our changes and take a look at the browser. There we go. We have our two custom buttons as expected. When we click the U button, the first name is converted to uppercase, and when we click L to lowercase. That's it in this video. Thank you for listening.